Hey guys, Nick here for Rev3 Games, and earlier this morning, Bethesda announced Battlecry, which is the first game from the aptly named Battlecry Studios out of Austin, and is also a game that I got to check out a couple weeks ago. So, here's the elevator pitch of Battlecry. What it is essentially a free-to-play, team-based melee combat game set in a world where gunpowder is completely banned. As a player, you take on one of 5 different classes. There's the Enforcer, the Duelist, the Tech Archer, the Gadgeteer, and the Brawler, 3 of which we got to mess with in our demo. From talking to the developers about the game, the idea was sort of to take the animation-driven single-player combat you see in action games and translate that to multiplayer, which is something I don't think I've ever really seen before, except for maybe Chivalry on the PC. That's kind of the closest example. But this is totally third-person and is all about these huge, almost TF2-style maps that you run around. So the 3 classes I got to mess with were the Enforcer, which is a tank class with this huge sword that can sort of spread out into a shield, the Duelist, which is a quick, sort of fast-paced character that has 2-handed weapons and a cloaking ability, and then the Tech Archer, which is a long-range projectile-based class with a chargeable bow and arrow. Every class in the game has 3 distinct abilities that are specific to their class and are on cooldowns that you trigger with either 3 buttons on the keyboard or the face buttons on an Xbox controller. So how does it play, I guess, is kind of the main question, and it's actually pretty fun. The melee combat felt pretty satisfying, if a bit simple. There is this nice back and forth when 2 Enforcers, for example, get locked into a battle of sword swinging and using the abilities. After messing with each of the classes for a while, I actually settled into the Enforcer as my favorite, and found myself pretty quickly putting together a strategy of like lunging into a battle and then using the whirlwind spin ability to hit as many dudes as possible, then using my standard attack and shielding while sort of waiting for my cooldowns to end and building my special moves back up. Moving around the world is actually pretty fun too. They've placed grapple points all over the stages that kind of allow you to quickly get around, because the game is so melee focused that if you're out of combat for too long, it would get a little bit boring. So does it truly capture the animation-driven combat of single-player games? I think it's a little too early to say, but based on my early experience with the game, I kind of have 2 main concerns. One of them is that the ranged combat character, the Tech Archer, who I used, just didn't feel very good. The melee battles seem like the heart and soul of this game, and picking off enemies at long range with very little feedback was just simply not very satisfying. The other concern is that it doesn't seem like there's necessarily a ton of depth in the hand-to-hand melee combat that I experienced. It was mostly just pulling right trigger or clicking the left mouse button over and over, but maybe that's just because I'm new at the game and I suck at it. It's totally something that they could work out over time, since this was a very early alpha that we were playing. So one other thing the developers talked about was keeping a positive community in Battlecry, and what that means to them is that when a match ends, you have a few moments, I think it's like 60 seconds or something, to run around the game world and congratulate or salute other players on a game well fought. It'll kind of label players like, this is the guy who got the most kills, this is the person who had the most teamwork, and you can kind of run around and salute them, and it earns both of you in-game credits. So it's kind of their way of trying to mandate that the players have a positive experience, which is a pretty neat idea. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that before. Another thing to note is that Battlecry is art directed by Victor Antonov, who you might know is the man responsible for City 17 in Half-Life 2 and the city of Dunwall from Dishonored. And it very much looks like the guy's work too. It's another grim, urban, war-torn cityscape, but to be fair, it is a little more stylized than some of his previous work. So the example they kept pointing to is that there's this enormous sun that sets in the background of some maps that literally takes up like a third of the skyline. It's a little more colorful though, and a little more interesting than most of the other team-based shooters out there, Team Fortress 2 notwithstanding. Anyways, Battlecry goes into open beta in 2015, so it is still a little ways off. If you have questions about the game, leave them down below and I'll be hanging out in the comments and answering anything you want to know about my time with Battlecry, but yeah, thanks for watching.